listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What's up, everyone, and welcome along to a new episode of the Straight to Video podcast. On today's show, I had a great chat with guitarist and multi-instrumentalist Andee Blacksugar from his home in Brooklyn, New York. Andee came to my attention as the guitar player in the band Acey, Slade and the Dark Party in the late 2000s. Andee, along with Acey and the rest of the Dark Party, visited the UK on numerous occasions and always put on great shows and delivered such killer music. Since then, though, Andee has been relentless in his musical output. His guitar playing is otherworldly and there's really no predicting what he is going to do next musically. Since his time in the Dark Party, Andee has toured with Peter Murphy of Bauhaus and is a member of German industrial band KMFDM, but his solo output really is second to none. He's recently completed a 3-album trilogy of material featuring the albums Wandering into the Bullseye, The Flowering and his most recent album Dream Finisher, which are all available from blacksugartransmission.com or through the Blacksugar Transmission Bandcamp page. Andee also has a guitar instrumental project called Sheer Velocity, which is something we dive into during our chat and well worth checking out. It really was great to catch up with Andee and finding him doing so well. We got to chat a lot about his musical collaborations and we of course had to touch on some Van Halen fanboying whilst we were at it too. So let's waste no more time. Here we go, and I hope you enjoy this straight to video talk with the brilliant Andee Blacksugar. Great to see you staying so busy. Do you think it's made it easy for you to kind of grab people's attention? Because everybody's online all the time during this lockdown. So has it helped with the response to the albums, do you think?
I don't know about that, actually. I didn't notice a difference because I think people were online all the time anyway. People are pretty much just online constantly now. And yet that doesn't seem to help musicians like us to get traction with our releases because people are online, but they're really just kind of blasting through timelines. There's such an assault of information coming at you that it really takes a lot to make you stop. Want to navigate away from your thing that you're on and investigate further. So one thing that has been beneficial is knowing that all my musician friends are at home so I can get them to do stuff. So like when I did Lockdown Lullabies, my goal was to have 13 guests on 13 songs. And that was no problem for me because everybody was at home.
I was going to ask how easy it was to pull it all together.
It was extremely easy. I mean, the hardest part was for me was to figure out who should go on what track and trying to figure out like, well, who takes a really long time to get back to me? I should hit them first. Hey, let's get them a track. The first track I finish is what they're going to play on because I know I'm going to have to like beg them for files in a couple weeks. But everybody came through and it was, I think everyone was like, just give me things to play on. Come on, let's stop me from going crazy over here.
I mean, because there's some big names on that album. I mean, Vernon Reid, Alex Skolnick. Where have you guys crossed paths over the years? Is it just through guitar shows, or have you done gigs with those guys, or is it just mutual friends?
Vernon Reid I met a long time ago, probably 12 years ago or something. And we have a mutual friend who is one of the super geniuses who designs the Eventide stomp boxes, which I've been using for a long time now. And when I made the first Blacksugar Transmission album, his name is Joe Waltz. He's not on social media. You won't be able to find a picture of him anywhere. He's so off the grid in a sense. It's funny, but he said, this album of yours, I think Vernon Reid would really like this. So he gave a copy of it to Vernon, and Vernon really did love it. And so he wanted to meet me. And we met and we became friends. So that has led to all kinds of interesting developments in my life as well, being friends with Vernon. Alex Skolnick, I still haven't met in person. We both live in Brooklyn, but Vernon is a mutual friend of ours. And Vernon frequently likes to name check Alex and me as being two of his favorite guitar players. So at some point, Alex started following me, and he's a really nice guy and a very approachable guy, for a famous icon, right? And when I came up with the idea to do Lockdown Lullabies, I happened to see a tweet of his that said something like, hey guys, this lockdown thing, you can do it. Come on, make it fun, get creative, make stuff. And I commented something like, hey, I agree. I'm making an album, doing a track a day for 13 days. And do you want to play on it? And he goes, sure, I'm into it. Send me a DM. Like, that was it. It was that easy. And I guess that I shouldn't make it seem like he's just going to play on everybody's record, but he must have had some kind of a positive idea that I wasn't a schmuck, from just the Vernon stuff. So yeah, hopefully I'd like to get together with him. We both live in the same borough, so I'd like to get together and have a coffee someday.
And how did your relationship with Doug Pinnick come about? Is that another similar thing, just mutual friends? You've done remixes for him and all that kind of thing as well, right?
Let's see. I'm a longtime fan of King's X, huge fan of King's X. So I've been going to see King's X for a really long time. I've seen them probably more than any band. And I remember meeting him just at their shows. I met all of them, at their shows because they would just kind of wander around afterwards. And again, very approachable. So he would remember me a little bit from the shows, but I was just a fan. And then Jerry Gaskill, the drummer of King's X, started showing up at my band's shows in New York. Jerry Gaskill lives in Red Bank, New Jersey, with his lovely wife, Julie. And they started coming to see my band play. And I don't know how they found out about my band, but they were fans of my band. So they would come and I'd be like, Jerry, what are you doing here? And that led to my playing with Jerry for his solo stuff.
Which band was it you was playing with at the time?
Oh, my band, it was called Popstar Kids. That led to my playing with Jerry for his solo stuff. So he did a solo album, then he wanted to do some local shows and play some of the material. So I've become very good friends with Jerry. And then I subsequently played on his next solo album, which came out a few years ago, called Love and Scars. I played on the whole record. So just through Jerry, I started hanging out a little bit more with the other guys in King's X. When they come to town, I'd be on the tour bus, hanging out with Doug. And so then Doug started paying attention to me a little bit. This was MySpace days, right? So, I remember him leaving a comment on my MySpace page that he loved the songs I was doing. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm going to ask Doug to sing on a song. Why not? I'm going to just ask him. I did. And he said, yeah, I'd be honored to. Again, just such a nice guy. Like, at the same time, I had asked Vernon to play on a song. So I did an EP called Use It that had a lot of guests on it. Actually, our friend Acey sang on one of the songs.
Right.
And Vernon and Doug were on there. And my friend Patty Rothberg is on that record. So anyway, that's how I became friends with Doug. And it was really just like me being a fan first. And then it was just sort of like this occasional musical collab kind of situation, which led to me doing a couple of remixes for him. And we made a video together of one of those tunes. So yeah, Doug, he's a real gem. He's one of my favorite people. He's just have you met him?
I've never met him. No, I've seen King's X live before, but I've never actually met him.
He's such a salt of the earth person. He's just incredibly genuine. There's just no artifice about him whatsoever. And just so humble. He's funny. I just love him to death. He comes to see me whenever I play in LA.
So cool. You don't go to pieces, do you? In the solos, like, oh shit, you watching too close.
It's funny. I don't feel intimidated by him because he's so gracious and he's so full of praise and everything. He doesn't come across like somebody, who's doing one of these with the arms crossed and the kind of the critical eye. I don't know. He just seems like he's not anywhere near as snobby as he could be.
Are you a fan of the stuff he does with George Lynch and Ray Luzier?
Oh yeah, I love that stuff. It's amazing to me that it works, because it's those kind of things. A lot of times they can be a little, I don't know, they're just convoluted or something. But they apparently just have like a magic thing where they get together and the songs just start coming out, and it's a matter of principle for them to do it quickly so that it's really fresh. And George plays great on that stuff. Really amazing.
So we're deep in already. We've already started, and we're just chatting.
Yeah.
I was going to start off with saying you put like one of the best kind of Van Halen tributes online the other week. It was one of the best and most heartfelt ones I saw, really just like going through everything about what was great about Eddie Van Halen. I just wondered if we could start off a little and talk about Van Halen's influence on you, both as a music fan and a player. Just wondering when and where you first heard them, or kind of what effect they had on you as a person.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, we could spend this whole time talking about Ed, but I would consider Van Halen to be one of the cornerstones of my early influences. You know, I was lucky in the sense that I heard them right after I became interested in this kind of music. When I sort of came online and became a music fan, I was probably 12. And all of a sudden now I'm noticing this kind of music and I'm just wanting to hear more of it. And when I was right in that early phase of just being knocked over every time I hear a new song by a new band, not that they were new, but I heard Van Halen as if they were a new band. I heard Running with the Devil. That was like my first, Van Halen song. I don't care whether that kind of music is your cup of tea or not. It's like, that is such an arresting piece of music when you hear that. I mean, first of all, it sounds like a spaceship landing, right? Which is what it is. They are a spaceship landing in 1978. They are nothing less than that. And then it just drops into this, like this tension building bass note with just the gnarliest tone. And then Ed and Al come in as if they're just like unholstering their guns. Pow, bah, bah, it's the kind of thing where I'm 100% in even before the verse starts. Like this is the best thing I've ever heard. You hear people say, well, I heard Eruption. I didn't know if it was a guitar or not. I had exactly the same reaction. And I remember listening to it. It was on the radio in the kitchen and my mom was there. And I was like, Mom, what is that there? What happens right there? Is that an organ or something? Because my mom doesn't know anything about rock music, but she's into classical music. So this sounds to me like suddenly a Bach fugue is starting up, which is the kind of thing that I heard around the house growing up. She's like, I don't know what that is. So anyway, my fandom of Van Halen was instantaneous. And I just devoured the Dave era, all those records.
I can't imagine what that was like, because you'd never hear that stuff on UK radio, even like probably going back to like the late 70s and 80s. The fact that like something like Eruption was played on the radio in America is crazy to me. So I can't imagine what that was like for kids and people your age just to hear that on the radio. It must have been insane.
Well, I mean, from what I understand, rock radio, when Van Halen came out in 1978, I think that rock radio wasn't playing so much of that kind of thing because there was a lot more like soft rock California stuff, Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, etc. I think Boston was probably, about as rowdy as the guitar rock got around that time. And Van Halen was just such a sensation that it just opened the floodgates for really hard rock and metal. And from what I recall, I remember hearing Eruption and You Really Got Me like as a twofer, so the radio stations would play them always together, the same way that they would play Heartbreaker straight into Living Loving Maid by Led Zeppelin. It was always a twofer, So yeah, and Eddie, of course, was just, for me, before I even picked up the guitar, he's one of the people that just made me become obsessed with the guitar, the way it looked, the way it sounded. I remember thinking of him as kind of like the North Star of rock guitar playing. I mean, there was nobody really greater than him. And I eventually started to dig deeper and find out about these other kind of virtuosos that took things further, the Yngwies and the people like that, or people that don't play rock necessarily that are virtuosos, like Alan Holdsworth. But the thing about Eddie was that it was so much more than his virtuosity. I mean, first of all, he wrote songs that completely connected with people that were not musicians. And so the band itself became this shorthand for like a way of life for like a whole generation of people. You know, it's like you see a picture of Eddie with his guitar with that smile and the guitar itself, which is just like a snapshot of American ingenuity. I mean, the guitar, you know, he built it himself because he had to, you know, a man of limited means who had big ideas had to figure out a way to get there. You know, to think that this guy was an immigrant, like literally off the boat, and yet we think of him as like a figurehead of the American dream. And Van Halen itself was sort of like the American dream as well. It was sort of like living big, you know, like following your dreams and having them pay off in ways that you could never dream of. And they always look like they're fully cognizant of that fact, never jaded about it, you know?
What's your go-to Van Halen album? Have you got one, or is it across the board?
My go-to is Fair Warning, which I was just listening to last night. Yeah. Go ahead. What's yours?
It's the album that took me the longest to get into, but I love Women and Children First.
Ooh, yeah.
It's probably the most craziest Van Halen album with some of the stuff on there.
It's so crazy. Yeah. Loss of Control.
Yeah.
Romeo Delight. Everybody Wants Some. It's amazing to me how bananas it really is. I mean, they sound like wild animals. You know, Eddie's guitar sounds like a wild animal. It sounds like a tiger in a cage. It's absolutely amazing. And Dave he's Tarzan. He's a pirate. I don't know what he is. He's this whiskey. He sounds like a 70-year-old blues man, you know, with peroxided hair. There's just nothing like it. There's absolutely nothing like that band. I think Fair Warning is my favorite because I think that the guitar sound was never better. The guitar sound was a bit reverby on Women and Children. It still sounds great, of course, but it's so nasty on Fair Warning. It's such a nasty, like toothy guitar sound. I mean, Unchained is like the pinnacle of Van Halen for me. Again, there's so much musical weirdness going on Fair Warning with Sinner's Swing, and Unchained as well with like the pre-chorus, you know. So David Lee Roth figured out something that would go over that.
That's the thing.
People don't give him enough credit for that. Like he had to figure out things to sing over this weird shit.
It's weird you bring that up. I actually listened back to, I don't know how it came up. It probably popped up on my YouTube and stuff because I've been scrolling so much Van Halen, so things just keep popping up on YouTube. But you remember the song Up for Breakfast, which they did with Sammy on the Best of Both Worlds one in like the mid 2000s. It was like a brand new Van Halen track, and it's awful. It's awful. It goes back to what you were saying there. Like Dave was able to figure out some really cool melodies and lyrics. And I'm a Sammy fan. I do like him, but what he came up with on that one is just terrible.
I don't recall that song.
That's why you don't recall it, because it's so bad.
I'm not a Sammy guy. Like for me, he's fine. I think, you know, when I think about that whole thing where they lost Dave and they got Sammy, it's sort of like, well, what else were they going to do? They weren't going to find another Dave. So instead they found this really professional guy who was already successful, already had his own following, could sing, you know, to the stratosphere, was not a megalomaniacal rock star. They did about as well as they could.
Mm-hmm. I think it suited where the rest of the band were at as well. Like I read something online saying once they got Sammy, they weren't rock and roll anymore. They weren't dangerous, but what they say, it's like when you put engine oil into a engine rather than Jack Daniels, it just cruised along.
Right.
It just ticked really nice. And I thought that was a really good way of summing it up.
Yeah. And it's cool and everything. I lose interest in the Sammy era. I think that the 5150 album is great. I think it's got some of Ed's best songwriting. Like as a songwriter, he was still continuing to blow up. Like when you think about the first album, I mean, the first album, when you think of pretty much any song on there, it's really straightforward songwriting. Like Running with the Devil really has two and a half parts. It's got a verse and a chorus, and it's got like the solo section, which is just, it's a throwaway. It's 2 chords or 3 chords or something. By the time you get to stuff like, you know, maybe on the third album with like In a Simple Rhyme, the songwriting is starting to expand.
Yeah.
It's multi parts. Diver Down is like that. Diver Down has like, you know, little guitars and secrets. I mean, little guitars is like it practically a symphony before the vocals even come in. It takes you all these places. And like, I heard a guy playing it on the piano on YouTube the other day, and it just brought a tear to my eye. Yeah. It was so beautiful, because when you're listening to Ed, you're kind of distracted by the guitar technique and the tone. And as a guitar player myself, I'm thinking like, yeah, I know what he's doing there. I know that chord. I don't know that one. I'm thinking. I'm not just hearing the notes. But when you put those chords on the piano, it's like, that is gorgeous. And it goes all over the place. So many modulations, and it's so free. And then the verse comes in, and it's a whole new, that whole thing, which he's pizzicato picking the whole time, which is a whole workout in itself. So anyway, like, I think of 5150, the song, as being one of those kind of Eddie compositions that's just really deep and dense and has so many parts, so many beautiful parts, but then like really nasty, aggressive parts. And it takes you around the world and back.
Awesome. Did you see him live?
No, I never got to see. I mean, the Dave era was before my time. The Sammy era, I just wasn't interested at that point. And I just, for whatever reason, I missed out on the reunion stuff. Yeah. I really regret it. I really wish I would have seen them in 2012.
Dang, man. It's crazy. It's still odd. I mean, I knew it was ill, but it's still just crazy for it to sink in. It's just bizarre. It really is. Really is.
Yeah.
What music were you listening to up until that point?
Van Halen was one of the first bands I got into. Before that, it was Queen.
Right.
Queen was the first.
From a guitar point of view, or just songs?
Well, it's funny because the way I got turned on to Queen was a very weird situation. It was actually at school at a pep rally. And a pep rally, do you guys have them in England?
I'm not familiar.
It's basically, on a Friday afternoon, they let the kids out of class a little early and send them all to the gymnasium where they sit in the bleacher seats. And the marching band is there and the cheerleaders are there. And it's this big kind of like pump up for the big game that night, the football game.
Right.
And so I'm in 7th grade, and there's this random cover band that's playing the pep rally, and they're playing whatever they're playing. I don't even remember, except for this one song. It turned out to be Another One Bites the Dust, which is not really a guitar song, but it sounded so good in the gymnasium because everything else sounded like shit. Because it's just bouncing all over the place. But Another One Bites the Dust was just like, it just translated because it's so spare. And I was just completely transformed into a rock fan that moment. As soon as I heard that in that setting, that song at that time, 12 years old or whatever I am, that was it. So Queen just hit me randomly almost. It could have been something else. Yeah. They could have played, it could have been some other tune, but that was the one. And I dove into Queen, and then my antenna was up for guitar bands. And
right. I
really wanted to hear more bands that had the loud guitars all the time. So AC/DC was a big one for me. Van Halen was a huge one. And then, Black Sabbath. So I was really digging back into the 70s. I was really infatuated with Queen, Black Sabbath, AC/DC, Van Halen, Alice Cooper, and the 80s stuff I started getting into as well. But my early favorites were definitely bands from the 70s. I didn't start playing guitar till I was 15. So by the time I picked up a guitar, I was so enamored with the guitar, and I was so smitten with guitar music that I almost couldn't believe that I was starting to play one myself.
What was the first song you learned? Can you remember?
Well, everybody picks up a guitar and they go like this. They go. You know what I mean? So I did that with like as many songs as I could, just learning them with the low E string being the first note of the song. So, and I've got it down in my lap, so I'm playing it with my thumb, and it was just stuff like that. I was just figuring out single note versions of riffs, and so I probably learned a bunch of songs wrong in the beginning. So I don't remember what I first learned right, but I definitely learned a lot of things wrong, but it was still exciting to me. And when I got my first electric guitar, I started taking lessons. So I had about 9 months of guitar lessons. That was that was one of the conditions of my receiving an electric guitar, was that I would have to take lessons. So I did. I don't know. I just started learning whatever I could that was within my grasp. I mean, when I learned how to do power chords, I just learned everything that had power chords in it. Eventually, my fingers got good enough that I could start doing more notey riffs. When you think about a song like The Trooper by Iron Maiden, That's got a lot of fancy finger work in there. And it's basically lead guitar technique. So by virtue of learning some of these trickier songs that had like trills and diatonic scale work and stuff like that, I was just sort of inadvertently learning the neck. I was learning about keys. I was learning lead guitar technique. It kind of started off very humbly with just some power chords, but just because I was playing the guitar constantly then, it was just new things were coming to me every single day. And there's just no substitute for that, where you're just the joy of doing it engenders more time doing it, and which engenders more learning and knowledge, which then refuels the joy and the enthusiasm, and it just turns into a cycle.
Is this in Philadelphia?
Yeah, we lived, mostly we lived in the outskirts of Philadelphia. Briefly, we lived northeastern PA, but yeah.
Was it easy to like track down new rock music? Where was you hearing it? Was it all on the radio, or did you have like a group of friends where you traded albums, or was there a good record store where you'd find stuff and take a gamble?
It was all of the above. It was the radio. There was actually a heavy metal radio show that was on Saturday nights in Philadelphia. And that's where I heard a lot of the harder stuff for the first time. And, you know, I had a small group of friends, that liked this kind of music and played this kind of music. So we would trade notes, and record stores, we kind of had to go to the mall to go to the record store. You know, it's sort of like either my mom would have to drive us, or, you know, somebody would have to give me a ride to the mall. And then, yeah, a lot of records I would just buy on, you know, the artwork. Yeah. If it looked scary, you know, if it looked scary, I was going to take a shot, you know. I remember I bought Rain and Blood because of that. Like, I had no idea what they sounded like. I just bought it because of the cover.
So what were some of your early bands once you started playing with musicians? How did that all start off?
Luckily, I made friends with two other kids who lived in my area that were brothers who played bass and drums. So it was sort of like an instant band, and we were all about at the same level. So we kind of started off, we never did get a singer. But it was good that we got together every weekend at their house. They had a basement where we could set up and blast away. And a lot of times their parents would go away on the weekends, and they would have parties, and we would just play through the whole night. And so it wasn't like a professional band by any means, but it was great to have that, because I was basically playing to records at home. Yeah. And that's like one way of learning. But when you get together with two musicians to play the same song that you're used to playing along to the record, it's like someone pulls the training wheels off. And it's just you guys that got to make all the sound now. And, you know, the drummer misses a fill or something, some cue is missing that tells you what the next part of the song is. The whole thing can fall apart. So that's why playing with other musicians is so important. And, you know, so it was not a professional thing, but I think that we did ultimately play the talent show instrumentally. And we did play a party where we had some kid sing who was really nervous about it, and he really didn't want to be heard. So he kind of like just turned himself down really low. But I didn't really play professionally until I was 18. And then I just joined a cover band that was a bunch of older people that were already established in the area. And that allowed me to go out and just kind of learn how to play gig. You know, I joined an original band after that, which was, again, like guys that were probably 10 years older than me, that were really great musicians that played kind of metal.
Yeah. Did that make you up your game?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, it was a really big deal for me. It was intimidating, but the drummer of that band was actually the drum teacher of my high school drummer. So he remembered me from back, you know, when I was in high school. He remembered that I was this kid that could kind of play. And so when he was putting his band together, you know, a few years later, he remembered me and he just reached out, and it was a huge deal. It upped my game. I was really nervous every time we played. So I would sit in the parking lot with this drummer, Mike, and we would sit there and listen to tunes in his car and drink 40s.
What a 40s?
40 ounces of beer.
Okay.
In one bottle. So it was, yeah, it took me a while before I started to feel comfortable playing on stage, like to where I didn't feel self-conscious the whole time, to where I could actually make my hands do what I wanted them to do. I don't know. I think for some people, it takes no time at all. For some people, it takes years. It's definitely like a completely different experience playing in front of any kind of audience, even if it's one person. Playing by yourself is sort of, it's deceptive because you're sitting there and you're calm, your heart rate is resting, you're in a comfortable place. And when you play in front of one person, you're now considering another person's attention span, another person's judgment, another person's, energy, whatever they're putting across. When you start adding more and more people to that, and you talk about all the X factors of performing in a space with equipment and acoustics and humidity and all these other things that will totally affect what happens, the temperament of the other musicians. Mm-hmm. There's just no substitute for doing that. So I'm glad that I did that relatively early. I have a lot of guitar students now that are like teenagers, and they don't really aspire to play in bands. I think they just aspire to be Instagram, YouTube guitarists.
How crazy is that? I knew you was going down that route as soon as you started saying they didn't aspire to be in bands. I knew you was going to say they wanted to do it on YouTube and stuff. That's wild.
Yeah, it's wild, right? It's weird because I kind of understand it, mm-hmm. because it's a very DIY thing that you can do. You don't need to get an advance to start a YouTube channel. You don't have to deal with wrangling band members and booking gigs and trying to get people to come out. And we also now live in this environment that is completely takes musicians for granted and doesn't value them at all. What's to motivate somebody? For me to look at the Eddie Van Halen paradigm of like, this is the American dream. This could be yours. Who wouldn't want that, right? But now it's like, what does a guitar player have as an exemplar? Yeah, I mean, there might be one or two, but my cat wants to say hi. Here's Buddy. So I don't know. I guess that's just where things are headed now. But that's a whole other skill set too. Just being a YouTuber, mm-hmm. right? You have to be a personality in front of a camera. You have to be able to make your videos engaging and be able to get people's attention and hold it and have something to offer that's valuable.
So what led to you moving to the New York area? Was it just more opportunities? Did an opportunity arise, or was there a particular reason?
Basically, I realized really quickly that the ceiling was very low in Pennsylvania for a person of an artistic temperament like me. And I had been to New York a number of times, and I felt like a fish in water here. I thought, I don't want to just play in cover bands for the rest of my life. It was looking to me like that was the only way people were kind of being musicians, was to get into a cover band and kind of play the region and maybe teach lessons during the day or something. And I wanted to go to the places that were turning out like artists that made records that I loved, and New York has the cool bands, New York has the Ramones and Blondie and Sonic Youth and Prong and Helmet. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an opportunity. I just came here. Yeah. And I trusted that good things were going to happen for me here. I had a feeling that I would be able to do more here than I could do there. And I would find my people and have a much better chance of finding opportunities and co-conspirators and adventures, frankly. It was only 50% about music. Right. It was coming here to have a life in this place that's so exciting. It's so eclectic. There's just energy on the streets. Every single day I walk out and there's just like this energy that, kind of fuels my footsteps. And it's a different group of people I see every day I walk out the door. And all the things I've been talking about with meeting all my heroes has been because I'm in New York making music and putting myself out there. The stuff that I'm talking about that I'm putting out there is my music too. It's like the stuff that would vibrate with a like-minded person.
Right.
So that's kind of what it's all about for me. New York has always been about people following their artistic muse, finding a support group for that, no matter what it is. It could be the weirdest thing. It could be the most bizarre kind of performance art or really confrontational electronic music. Mm-hmm. And you'll be able to get people out to watch you do it,
Was the West Coast ever an option, or was New York the goal because of that whole artistic element?
When I moved to New York, I had never been to LA or the West Coast. New York was close enough that I could come here and have a look.
Yeah.
So there was that, but I also I genuinely prefer the New York vibe and the New York aesthetic to the LA aesthetic. I'm way more inspired by the CBGB's scene and the Andy Warhol scene than I am by the Sunset Strip. And not that there, obviously we're just talking about Van Halen, but overall, I think, I'm a Four Seasons kind of guy. I like things to be a little bit gritty. New York City is just logistically, it's much more of a city than LA is. LA is like a suburb, and you have to have a car. And moving to New York was like a way of getting rid of that albatross as well. No more car for me. Not interested. Don't want one. So yeah, that's basically in a nutshell why I came to New York.
Is there any kind of particular clubs or anything which you miss from when you first came, other than you mentioned CBGBs, but is there any other kind of element which is no longer around, which you're like, shit, those were really good places to hang out and, like, say, meet people?
Well, there's places that you hear about. Max's Kansas City is one that you hear about from the New York Dolls era and the Patti Smith era, etc. You hear about Danceteria. But I actually got here in time to play at Limelight while it was still called Limelight. That was my first gig.
Yeah.
After I moved here. Yeah, I played with this goth band, and we played the Vampires Ball at the Limelight, which is, this legendary, it's a church. It was this Bacchanalian club. So I got to witness that. I played at CBGB's many times. I played at the original Shanae, where Jeff Buckley recorded live at Shanae. I played the Continental, Don Hills, the original Luna Lounge. I'm happy. I got to play those places before they all vanished. Yeah. Those places I think all those places I just mentioned are gone now.
Because you seem to be somebody who's constantly looking for different styles of music and different genres of kind of things. So how is it now? Do you find new clubs and new hangout spots all the time, which perhaps your regular rock guys perhaps wouldn't know about?
Yeah, there's always stuff going on. For me, it's a matter of staying in Brooklyn and usually looking east. That's where, the gentrification moves eastward in New York City. So the neighborhood I live in is Williamsburg, Brooklyn, which has been gentrified for a long time now. So I tend to look for clubs, small clubs that have cool DJs playing house music of some kind or another, or some kind of techno. There's plenty of that to go around, really. And it's fun. It's sort of like an adventure. You look up, you have to spend a good hour or two before you go out, pinpointing a few options and then going to SoundCloud and checking out all the DJs to see what kind of stuff they spin. Of course, we're talking pre-COVID now, right? So typically Friday or Saturday night out for me is not going to see bands. It's going to find DJs and a place with a fog machine. Sometimes I go see bands, but it's usually somebody that I know. I certainly don't go and just check things out randomly. I don't know why. In a way, it's sort of easy for me to enjoy myself in a place that's just got a DJ.
Yeah.
Because if I go to see a band and there's something about the band that annoys me or it doesn't sound good, it's almost like I'm going to my job in a way.
Right.
I can't help but think of what I do. I'm probably a bit picky, but there's still plenty of places to see bands. Well, not right this moment because of COVID. They're closing rapidly. So I put that out there as a caveat for basically everything I'm about to say. But there's still a lot of places, still a lot of music venues for bands in New York. But, the tide has been turning so much towards this kind of wealthy gentrification culture that it's overall on the decline, the live music thing, because those people don't want to go out and hear new music by new bands. They don't want to go out and hear the new Sonic Youth, I guarantee you. If anything, they'll do karaoke somewhere, or they'll go to some bar that charges $13 for a drink and plays 80s hits over the PA. So I guess the upside of COVID is that a lot of those people are leaving the city right now. So who knows? Maybe if we talk again in a year, maybe there will be a whole new underground art scene that is flourishing here because the rents are going down.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the building I live in right now, half of it is empty right now. And there are landlords out there who are like, I need tenants. Send your friends. I'll make a deal with them.
You're not negotiating your rent bill.
No, I'm not. But I'm lucky because I've been here for so long that it's rent stabilized. So my rent is
cool.
For this neighborhood. It's a very low rent.
You've worked with two classic acts, Peter Murphy of Bauhaus and currently KMFDM. How much of an influence were those acts to you growing up, or was you in full metal mode at that point when they were having their success?
I was a huge fan of Bauhaus before I played with Peter. Casual fan of Peter Murphy solo. And I've been a huge fan of KMFDM for 20 years. So for me, that was really kind of a big deal. I mean, both of them were a big deal, but I was a lot more conversant with KMFDM than I was with, for instance, Peter Murphy's solo catalog.
Right.
When I started playing with Peter, he was sort of in the middle of or towards the end of a tour that was called the Mr. Moonlight Tour, where he was doing all Bauhaus tunes. So it was his sort of farewell to the Bauhaus catalog for his fans. He was like, all right, look, I know all you guys want to hear Bauhaus songs every time I go on tour. Here you go. I'm giving you a full show for a whole year, whole tour, and that's it. And then I'm done. So when I joined, I had a big set of Bauhaus tunes to learn.
Yeah.
And it was very exciting.
Nice. Had you learnt any of that stuff in the past, or was it all fresh to you? Yeah, you knew the songs, but actually diving in and learning the parts.
I'd never dived in and learned the parts, but I knew how the songs went. I knew Silent Hedges and I knew Double Dare and all that stuff. I knew how those songs went, but it was surprisingly challenging stuff to learn in a way, because a lot of those early songs, the guitar parts are it's almost like making noises and textures. A lot of them are in the key of E with a lot of similar types of moves around the 12th fret with a delay. And it's like, it was actually, I only had 3 days to learn 30 songs for that tour. So I was kind of going insane with all of the songs kind of swimming around in my head. Like, I remember when I got on the plane to go meet the band and do a couple rehearsals and go on tour, I sat there in my seat on the plane and I just like closed my eyes and I ran the whole set in my head and just tried to keep all the parts straight in my mind. And I kind of managed to do that. So I think that was the moment where I felt like, okay, I think I can do this.
But like I say, most of the problem is being familiar with the songs and the changes and stuff. So having that slight knowledge perhaps helped you beforehand, because that's the hardest thing when I have to learn songs. I can learn songs pretty fast, but maybe give me a week or so before just to have them on in the car while I'm just driving and just get used to them. And then I'll dive in, because stuff's changing all the time. It's hard enough for me on bass, so I can't imagine what it's like on guitar, learning all the intricate parts. I can always just ride on the A for a while till eventually come round.
Yeah. Well, no, what you're saying is exactly right. I mean, you have to be able to have the song internalized. If someone says, okay, play Don't Stop Believin', if you can't hear dun, 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 if you can't hum the first couple bars of that song, you're lost. You're not going to be able to play the song, So it's that thing of just being able to, cue it up in your mind. And then if you're somebody that, even if you've never learned the song on the instrument itself, you can probably get through it. If it's not too hard, you can probably get through it without, even if you never played it. If you have it in your head, you're home free. So you're right. Yeah, I had that advantage, having heard the songs. A lot of them I hadn't listened to in years. So it was a lot of cramming.
How was the first gig?
How's the first gig?
Yeah, how was it? Well, did it take maybe like 2 songs in you started to feel settled? Or?
Yeah, the first gig was a tough one. It was at a really small venue called Pappy and Harriet's, which is in the desert in California. It's kind of a legendary place, but it's tiny. And it was a good place for me to have my first show. As far as I know, it hasn't been video uploaded to YouTube, which is good. It was fine. I really botched the intro of this one song. Just as the thorn in my side for this whole thing was that I had to play a lot of 12-string acoustic guitar. I'd never seen a left-handed 12-string anything in my life, and I'm left-handed. So I arranged with Peter's crew to play one of Peter's 12 strings restrung upside down for this first tour, because it was such short notice and I could not find a 12-string left-handed guitar. So here I am. I have never played a 12-string in my life, and I show up to the first rehearsal and they're like, here, you can play this. And they give me this thing that's just been jury-rigged. They didn't change the nut or anything. So like the skinny strings are in the fat slots and the fat strings are in the skinny slots. It was a nightmare. So now I'm having to start the show all by myself on this horrible instrument. So yeah, that was sort of the thorn in my side that caused the first show to be a little anxiety ridden. But I kept working on it. Like the next day I was kind of sitting there with that awful 12 string and trying to figure out a new way to play this part that would be easier for me ergonomically. And eventually I kind of found a workaround. And the second show was like, 100% better than the first show. And then it was great after that.
I love the fact you've covered some of your favourite albums from start to finish. I think the first one, which I recall you doing, was the Joe Satriani one. You've since done Garbage and Motorhead. But I love the fact you did Madonna's debut album. That's one of my favourites. The artwork was perfect for that. It looked amazing. Was you a big 80s pop fan, or was there just something about Madonna that set her apart? She's certainly my very first, let's say, pop obsession.
Yeah, she's definitely one of my favorites of all time. When I was a kid, when I was a heavy metal kid, of course, I wanted nothing to do with Madonna or anything that was poppy, including things that were, stuff like Prince. I didn't even like when I was, I just wanted to hear the stuff that you couldn't dance to. But, later on in life, I started to appreciate pop music. I started to realize the genius of the Madonna catalog.
It's very New York as well.
Very New York. Right. I didn't get into Madonna until I was in New York. And then I got that first album and eventually got into the rest of her catalog. And I could talk at length about the different eras, their relative merits and so on. I love her 90s period, the erotica, bedtime stories, Ray of Light, all that stuff. But my band that I've mentioned a few times that I was playing in the early 2000s, Popstar Kids, we actually covered her first album in its entirety as a show.
Wow.
So we did that a few times here. And, we did it our way. We rearranged some of the songs and some of the keys had to be changed so I could sing comfortably. But yeah, that's sort of that's what inspired me to record it later, was that I had already kind of done this, and I thought it would be a fun recording project for me to just kind of refer back to those shows that we had done and use that as a jumping off point. Yeah, I mean, as far as 80s pop, it doesn't get much better than, pop doesn't get much better than 80s pop. When you think about like the people that were huge, Peter Gabriel was a giant pop artist in the 80s.
Yep.
Prince, Michael Jackson, The Police, and people like that are pop bands. Even Van Halen, when you think about Jump, it's like this was the pop music of that time, and that's really good pop music. So, I'm a longtime fan of Madonna, and I've seen her many times.
You wasn't able to get that album to anybody in her camp? Anybody heard it or anything like that, do you know?
No, I always try. Every time I do one of these things, I try to get the artist to be aware of it, and I don't know that it ever works.
The one you're not expecting will be the one that hits. Is there any other albums you'd consider covering? Is it like 3 albums you've done now, which are These Are Not Our Beautiful Songs albums?
Yes.
There's some great stuff. I was listening to the Kylie Minogue one earlier on. This is amazing.
Thank you. We're probably going to do some more of those. I think that's kind of fun because if you commit to doing a whole album, you got to be ready to do every song on that album. And for one thing, it's got to be great from start to finish. Otherwise, it's not that much fun. And then you also have to physically be able to perform it. So the albums that you're referring to, which are all instrumental reworkings of cover tunes, those are sort of each album is a hodgepodge of art, songs by different artists. So everything from Jimi Hendrix to Kylie Minogue to Prodigy. So it's like that kind of thing, and that's a little bit easier. Right. Because then, it's funny, like it's another crowdsourcing thing that I've done, is just asking people randomly on social media, like, what songs would you like to hear me cover? And just the array of things that get thrown out. It's like, it's really cool. It's inspiring. A lot of things I wouldn't think of. So yeah, we're definitely going to do another one of those down the road. But I've just been a little bit busy the last month or so. Congratulations
on the new album and the completion of the trilogy, if you like.
Thank you, sir.
What's been the response to the single? Is it Twatted?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you pronounce it Twatted or do you say Twatted?
We say twatted.
Yeah.
You might say twatted.
We say twatted, yeah. That's great, man. Someone compared it to Blair, which I thought was bang on, the whole vibe of it.
That's really interesting because I wouldn't have thought of that, but it does make a lot of sense. Yeah, the response has been really good. I love hearing stuff like that. Like people are comparing it to Pulp and Blur and all these things. I was just hoping that nobody would notice that it's the same chords essentially as Lay Lady Lay by Bob Dylan.
There's only 12 notes, man. Something's gonna clash at some point.
Sure. But yeah, it's been great. And, it was fun to just put out an uplifting single with a lot of F-bombs in it.
All righty, man. Well, thank you ever so much for your time and keep us posted with everything.
Beautiful.
All righty, man.
Thank you, Rob Lane.
You're more than welcome, Andy. I'll speak to you soon.
See you later. Bye-bye.
You're in your face.
Really had a great time chatting with Andee Blacksugar on the Straight to Video podcast, and I really appreciate his time and great musical stories. Be sure to listen to or pick up some great Blacksugar Transmission music from blacksugartransmission.com or by visiting the Bandcamp page. Andee is also on Patreon, along with all the usual social media sites. Once again, I always need to thank you, the amazing listeners, for choosing the Straight to Video podcast when there's such a great amount of killer podcasts out there. Truly do appreciate your valuable time and support. You make this a lot of fun. So until next time, I've been your host, Rob Lane. Be sure to look after yourselves, and I'll catch you on the next one.